Good evening, and thanks so much for joining us for MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. You couldn't open a paper this week without seeing Governor Snyder in the headlines. He's preparing to release his plan on fixing Detroit schools. He's traveling the country, spinning Michigan's comeback story. He's selling Prop 1, and he's dodging rumors of a presidential run. So coming up, are the governor's trips an attempt to raise his national profile for 2016, or is a White House run just really too far-fetched? Plus, the governor prepares to reveal his plan on how to improve education in Detroit and in Michigan. Will it incorporate any of those recommendations from the Coalition for the Future of Detroit Schoolchildren? And how much money will have to come from Lansing? Also, a former Inkster police officer in jail charged with beating a driver after a police camera catches him in the act. And we'll talk about some of this week's attention-grabbing headlines. That is all coming up for you on MiWeek. But we do start with the governor's answer for improving education in Michigan. Snyder is expected to announce his plan this week or next. He has met with leaders of the Coalition for the Future of Detroit Schoolchildren. Last month, the group released its own recommendations on how to fix education in the city. Now, reports say the governor will reveal a plan to split Detroit public schools into two districts. One district would exist to pay off the debt using revenue from the current 18 mil tax. The other district would focus on educating children. Sound complicated? Yep, and that is where we begin our discussion with our MiWeek contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Gentlemen, it's always good to see you. We're starting to hear reports about this, and the governor is set to announce it anytime now. So, Nolan, when we say two school districts, that confuses people right off the bat on this.
Well, it's two entities, basically. The old school board and school district under the emergency manager would stay in place basically as a pass-through entity to raise the tax millage, the 18 mills property tax the district still raises, and pass it on to pay off the bond debt. The other district, if you would, the new company they're calling it, would be in charge of everything else, would handle the education, the schools, and what have you. And it would be what's called like a local education agency, which is a better way of calling it an all-charter district when you're trying to navigate the politics of Detroit. And basically, it would create a portfolio of schools, each one more or less independently operated, not necessarily under a central control, but perhaps run by various charter operators or by the LEA itself. I don't know what the specifics are going to look like, but it's certainly going to look different than it is now.
And all charter districts, and we just call it what it is.
Well, it's not an all charter district. I mean, first of all, it's going to be
Looks
run.
like one.
It's going to be run by a board that has appointees from the governor and the mayor. It's going to look a lot like the reform board that we had here in Detroit 15, 16 years ago. This is a plan that actually has been pushed by quietly by the Duggan administration behind the scenes, sort of alongside the coalition, this old company, new company thing. It's not an all-charter district. It doesn't look like an all-charter district. They're not going to have, there will be some DPS charters within this district, but the charter schools will still operate the way they do in Detroit, and there will be an education commission that manages all of it.
They described it as looking like Highland Park and Muskegon Heights, which are all charter districts.
They're not going to call it.
They're not going to call it that. It's going to look more like New Orleans than it does the current Detroit model.
Okay, so wait a minute. So if you're talking about a new board that's going to be appointed by Duggan and Snyder, and then you're talking about a commission that's also going to be overseeing that as well. Where does that leave then the Detroit School Board, which is in place right now but does not have a lot of power because of an emergency manager?
I mean, under this
so you got three boards?
Under this plan, they'll manage the indebted old district. I mean, I think that's going to be a point of some real negotiation and pushback from Detroiters who, again, I think will have a very good case for saying, why are we being treated differently from every other school district in the state? Everybody else has some control, some local control over their schools. I don't think you can even constitutionally single them out for permanent
well, you can under the
loss
emergency
of that.
law. And what they're saying is it's not permanent. What they're saying is once the debt is paid off, the old district or the old school board would resume its control over DPS schools. Now, how many of those are left by that time is anybody's guess. But this commission you're talking about, there'll be one additional entity or board or what have you to run the DPS part of this. Then there'll be an overall commission to to oversee all education, charter, EAA, allocate DPS to handle things like joint enrollment. I didn't see transportation mentioned in the plan. I don't know if he's going to take that on or not. If he doesn't, he misses one of the key problems in the city.
I mean, one of the
because
other
choice doesn't work without transportation.
And one of the other key differences between this and an all-charter district is that this education commission will control who opens schools, where and when, and will control who closes them. Charter schools right now don't operate under anything like that.
But he's not going to limit the number of authorizers, and he's not going to.
Well, people can, but they will have to get that authorization from the Education Commission. They will not just be able to do it on their own.
Let's talk about the debt. And the coalition had recommended that the state take on a lot of the debt. Is that going to be a possibility here?
In some form, that's what they're going to use the 18 mills Detroit collects now for education to pay off their debt. That money is going to go to pay off the debt, which raises the question, how do you make up for that money in the classroom? It's 53 million. It's a sizable chunk of their operating money. And I don't know, I mean, that then depends on what you can get out of the legislature. Citizens Research Council last week said if you just strictly take it out of the school aid fund, it reduces per pupil spending by $50 a kid throughout the state. That's a big ask of the legislature. And you had the legislative leaders last week saying, there's a little bit of Detroit weariness in Lansing now after the bailout of the city.
Is there a possibility that this can then go anywhere if you don't have the legislative buy-in?
I don't think you have any choice. If you don't take care of this, you are either going to leave a debt that the state ran up unaccounted for, or you're going to leave Detroit kids $53 million short in their education, which is not. It's not the kids' fault. It's not the system's fault that this debt exists. This is about the state.
They may believe they can find that money through more efficient operations, through cutting waste. I mean,
a lot of money.
There's a lot of different options they have.
So what did the coalition then give to this? When they sat and they looked at everything for 90 days, they came out with their report. How much does it get to what the governor actually is proposing?
I think there are three big, and I wrote about the three big things that I thought came out of the coalition's report a week and a half ago, and pretty much the governor accepted in some form all three of them. One was the preservation of an actual public school district that is not all charters. Two is the creation of this education commission that will govern education in the city for public schools, charter schools, all of them. And the third is dealing with this debt. Now, how they deal with the debt seems there's sort of an open end to making up the money for dealing with the debt. But the old co, new co was something that the Duggan administration had been pushing for behind the scenes and wanted and felt like it was a solution to those debt problems.
Yeah, I don't think the commission is going to recognize very much of this plan when they see it. And, I would disagree with Steve. I think this is going to look more like an all-charter district than it doesn't. That's how it was described to us. I think the debt's on the table. The reason they dedicated the 18 mills to the debt was because they weren't sure they could get a source of money out of the legislature to pay for it. It may be that the district has to eat that $53 million a year, find some way to make up for it. And I'm not sure how heavy this oversight of all schools in Detroit is going to be. I think they're going to manage some operational stuff. They're going
to decide where schools go, when they open and when they close.
I'm not certain under this governance plan it's going to be that heavy-handed.
The thing that gets to me, though, is that we haven't even touched on what is happening inside the classrooms. And if I'm a parent and I'm still wondering, okay, you're talking about all of this structurally, what does this still mean for me and for my student who's sitting in a classroom with 35 other students and may not have the proper books and have the proper education tools? I also want to talk about the teachers. Now, the head of the Detroit Federation of Teachers, Steve Kahn, has come out and said, you know what's being done here, and I'm quoting him directly, is unconscionable. It's destruction of the city and the community. And whatever it takes, we're going to strike, rally, march. There's going to be civil rights protests. We're going to get the entire city on its feet for the defense of public education for the future of the young people. When you have the leader of the Detroit teachers saying this about a plan that hasn't even been fully announced yet, what can you say about the buy-in?
6 months ago, he's a frothing lunatic, for God's sakes. That's one of the problems the state's facing. They got the head of the teachers union is this BAM radical anarchist, and all of the teachers don't even follow him. So you've got disarray. There's nobody really to work with at the local union level. They've been trying to work with David Hecker at the Michigan Federation of Teachers at the AFT. I mean, they're in a mess when it comes to working with the unions. I mean, he's threatening a strike, which might be the best thing that could happen, because then you could fire them all and start anew.
Yeah, but you can call him all the names that you want, but the teachers elected him to this post. And so what does it mean, though, when he's coming out this vehemently against a plan like this?
I mean, I think he's probably jumped the gun a little bit, and he is he's a radical element in this conversation. I also don't think you can just dismiss him. As you point out, teachers elected him. You cannot do successful school reform by beating up on teachers. There's no model for that anywhere in the country.
What about this plan makes you think that's what they're going to do?
Well, I think if the teachers don't like it, if the teachers don't want it,
but that's what I'm trying to say. You don't have a unified teacher body.
You do need a buy-in.
In Detroit. You've got half of the teachers now absolutely, beside themselves because of this radical leadership that's in place. You've got chaos in the teacher ranks, which I agree is going to make it a lot harder, but I don't know how you get anything through Khan and that BAM group that's running
I think working through David Hecker at AFT, which is one of the things.
His hands
he's
full,
on the coalition. I mean, I think there are ways to get teachers to buy into this. They're not going to just buy into whatever the governor wants, and that's okay.
You can get individual teachers too, but you're never going to get any union cooperation as long as he's part of it.
I'm not sure that's true.
All right, well, we're going to have to see what the exact plan is when the governor rolls it out in the next couple of days, and we'll continue to talk about that.